Welcome back to Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Madisonville Marine. Boy, do they have the specials going on right now, and they carry all kinds of boats. I mean, any kind of boat you're looking for. G3, Suncatcher, Skeeter, Hurricane deck boats, on and on and on and on. They carry them all. They've got deals going on right now that you can check them out just through March 31st, so you've got a week to get down there, visit them online as well. And right now, they got an extended warranty available from Yamaha Motors. But again, that's through the 31st. Madisonville Marine, there's no better place to buy a boat. All right, time to welcome in the final member of today's panel from GoVols247.com, Ryan Callahan. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, back with Vince and Josh as well. Let's talk more about Tennessee's offense. It's been brutal the last couple of years. It's like, well, you don't have two good shooters. But if you had a driver, well, you don't have a driver. Well, if you had somebody in the low post that's a real threat, you don't have that either. So it's been kind of rough. Kennedy Chandler kind of developed at the last part of last year. He stepped in and filled that driver role. But let's take a look here at some interesting stats about offense and being one-dimensional. We've talked about this forever. But here's the numbers from this year's Elite Eight. 7 of the 8 teams that made it were ranked in Ken Pomeroy's top 35 for offensive efficiency. 6 of the 8 teams were in Ken Pomeroy's top 35 for defensive efficiency. 5 of the 8 teams that made the Elite Eight were top 35 offense and defense. It's tough to do it when you're one-dimensional. And here's the thing, the way it's flipped, 2 of the 3 that were one-dimensional that made it, far better on offense than defense. The days of defense carrying you all the way to a title are probably behind us, at least for now, in the age of the analytic 3. All right, let's take a look at some charts here. Don't know if you can follow this, but what you've got, I just wanted to look, 3-point percentage and fast break points. Those are the 8 teams that made it, plus Tennessee. See their little logos there. Basically, the fast break points go up and down. Tennessee's the very bottom. You see how many fast break points everybody else gets compared to you. 3-point percentage is left to right. You want to be on the right. Tennessee far back on the left. They don't score. So basically, you want to be in that upper right quadrant. Tennessee is almost off the lower left quadrant in terms of 3-point percentage and fast break points. All right, so if you don't score that way, you got to get points in the paint, right? So let's take a look at the next graphic. Same thing. Points in the paint, you're only better than San Diego State, okay? So the other 7, way up there ahead of you. And then if you look at pace, just in terms of watching them, dead last. That's left to right, so they're far over there on the left. Again, you're in that lower left quadrant. You want to be in the upper right. It's tough to win with a one-dimensional team. We all know that, and I think this kind of puts it in a visual form that you can see one of these things is not like the others. You're not like the others for the most. San Diego State's the closest thing to you, but they've got a little bit better offense. Gentlemen, do you think, and I'll start with you, Ryan, my fear is that Rick Barnes is going to look at that Duke win and the Sweet 16 run and say, this validates it all. We need more defense. Better defense. Let's focus more. I'm scared to death. He's not going to look at this and say, all right, we got to fix this offense. What's your take?
Well, I don't think Tennessee fans should waste a lot of time hoping for a system change. I think Rick Barnes largely is who he is, and he's going to look for the same types of players. He's going to do a lot of the same things. I just think he feels he needs better players. And so I think he's going to look for players that can give him more of what he had with Grant Williams and Admiral Schofield, more of that type of team that has the shooters, has the guys who can drive to the basket and get a tough bucket when they need one. He's not going to rebuild the machine. He's just going to put better parts in it, I think, and that's the focus. I think he wants to go get a scoring guard, things like that, to make it a better version of what this team was.
Well, they better be good defensively, because we showed in that last one with Justin Powell, if you're not playing defense, you're not going to be out there to put points on the board. So so you don't sound like you've got a lot of hope of the offense changing. I don't have a lot of hope for that. Vince, Josh, are we being too negative here?
Well, the offense has to change. I mean, those graphics are gross. Yeah. I mean, they look like you can't overcome them. And I know Tennessee got to the Sweet 16 being that, so they accomplished something.
It's just hard to string 3-4 wins together in the NCAA tournament when you're having to do it with one side of the ball only.
Yeah, because if you go cold, then what?
Yeah.
And that's where this conversation is. So my expectation is what Ryan is saying, that they're going to look at, okay, well, what can change personnel-wise for us to be better, to be more dynamic scoring, find shooters and hope they hit later. And there's some truth to that, but if we're having an annual conversation about the same thing, then part of it is personnel and who you're bringing in, because that's still the coach's either choice or responsibility. but what you're getting out of them, what you're allowing them to do. Because, like in your last segment, I thought Drew Pember would be an example of a player that they did have who had an offensive skill set that would have been worth developing so that he could flourish at Tennessee. Does he put up the same numbers? Nobody would expect that probably.
Right.
But he had a skill set that I thought could add what they're missing, but he's at UNC Asheville.
Vince, quickly.
Yeah, I think it is going to be that they're looking at personnel. I talked to Greg Polinsky, had a one-on-one with him afterwards, after the loss, and he told me they need a dynamic, consistent penetrator. And he said, Jemiah tried to do it a little bit. They were missing that with Zakai Ziegler, but I think they need even another level of, or more of them.
They could drive and finish.
Yeah, drive and finish. And so they need a bigger guard that can do that. That's something you have to address in recruiting. And it sounds like they continue to emphasize that they need to do that, and the players didn't execute that. So to me, that sounds like, hey, we got to go get guys that are going to execute what we want to do offensively. Do the coaches adjust to their personnel if they get those kind of player, or do they fall back into feeling like they're handcuffed, like Julian Phillips plays sometimes, like he's indecisive, I'm going to get pulled if I don't make this right pass and this right cut. So that's what it has to be the adjustment with this coaching staff. We'll see if that changes, but I do think for them it starts with the personnel.
Part of the fear would be Julian Phillips as an example. A year ago when he chose Tennessee, I thought this is the kind of guy, a 6'8" guy that has the ability to make plays around the basket that they could use. And against USC, didn't we watch Julian Phillips play and say, this is what they've needed?
Yeah.
And then we didn't really see that a lot of the way. We saw glimpses where he'd make plays around the basket. Okay, but why didn't we see that? Is that all Julian, or were there other aspects that kept him from being able to flourish?
Well, and I'll say this, I don't think they've intentionally been trying to get guys who can't score as well out of the transfer portal and out of high school. I just think they've made some bad evaluations in some cases, or guys haven't developed the way they thought in some cases. I think in the transfer portal especially, they've got to do a better job of finding these scorers who are going elsewhere. All these teams in the Elite Eight, almost all of them, are relying on transfers that are key players.
So you're saying don't go to Sacred Heart and get E.J. Anasicki?
There are guys to be found at some of those schools, but you got to find them.
I would just say this: if you go back and read, I think it was Nicole Auerbach in The Athletic. It was very interesting when she was talking. She came in for late in the season, and the whole article is just everything's defense, defense, defense here, defense, defense, defense. And they talked about recruiting, and it was it's hard to find defense when you're recruiting. So what we look for is these certain skills that can translate to defense. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure they are looking for offensive weapons. I think they're looking at guys who can play defense.
I've said for a while I think they're looking for an all-around skill set that is kind of detrimental to building a great offense. So you're looking for a guy who can do everything, and when you're doing that, you don't find great shooters and things like that.
We've just gone way over, so let's cut this break. When we come back, let's start talking about Rick Barnes. Should fans be happy with what they're getting from Rick Barnes, or should they want more? We'll discuss that coming back on the Sports Source.